Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for hanging in there while we did a couple of minutes of last minute housekeeping. I want to welcome you all to today's webinar, International Opportunities and Responsibilities for the Canada Water Agency. And happy International Women's Day to all of our accomplished women panelists, all of my colleagues, and all of the amazing women participating today. Thank you so much for joining us and marking this day with us. My name is Stephanie Merrill, and I'm a knowledge mobilization specialist with the Global Water Futures program based at the University of Saskatchewan. Today's event is being convened by Global Water Futures and is a continuation of our work through the Water Security for Canadians initiative. That's a partnership that includes the Forum for Leadership on Water, the Polis Project on Ecological Governance at the University of Victoria, the Center for Indigenous and Environmental Resources, the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment and Health, Massey College, the Beaubien Foundation, and Aquaforum. For those of you who may be new to Global Water Futures work, a short introduction. Global Water Futures is the world's largest university-led water research program. It's a partnership between the University of Saskatchewan, McMaster University, University of Waterloo, and Wilfrid Laurier University. We're at the halfway mark of a 7-year program to advance the science needed to better forecast, prepare for, and manage water futures in the face of dramatically increasing risks from climate change. Working with water practitioners, governments, industries, civil society, and Indigenous communities guides us and enables us to better connect our science and evidence into water programs, decisions, and policy developments. We're excited and optimistic at the opportunity before us, the opportunity to design a Canada Water Agency to be the leading agency that we need in order to modernize water governance and management mechanisms to ensure water security for all for future generations. We hope that you have engaged in the Government of Canada's consultations to date, and we're all looking forward to hearing from them on next steps. In the meantime, we're continuing the discussion today with a focus on strengthening Canada as an international role model and the opportunities that lie ahead in the export of talent, science, tools, and technology, with the agency poised to champion Canada's water expertise around the world. And we have some fantastic guests today who will speak to these opportunities and responsibilities. Some quick logistics. The webinar will be 90 minutes long. And if you haven't found them already, you can listen in French by clicking the interpretation icon in the toolbar and also choose closed captioning in English in the toolbar. We're recording in both languages and we'll share with everybody after the event. Please use the dedicated Q&A function to submit your questions, and we hope to be able to draw on these to our guests later in the program. I want to officially begin by acknowledging that we're all participating today from traditional territories across the First People of this country and others. I'm in my home province of New Brunswick, outside the Fredericton area, which is on the unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik Nations of the Wolastoq, otherwise known as the St. John River. I ask you to take a moment to please acknowledge with yourself the territory from which you are participating. And we thank the land for providing the space from which we meet virtually today and the positive energy for convening our important discussions. We'll start with a stage-setting presentation, a joint presentation by Dr. Corinne Schuster-Wallace and Robert Sanford. Corinne, you can get your slide deck up and I'll do a quick introduction of both of you. Dr. Corinne Schuster-Wallace is an associate professor in the Department of Geography and Planning at the University of Saskatchewan and the assistant director of the Global Water Futures program. Corinne's research areas are in water, disease, climate change, and sustainable development, with a focus on the need to account for interconnectedness of water for life, nutrition, and livelihoods to ensure positive health and well-being. Robert Sanford is the Global Water Futures Chair in Water and Climate Security at the United Nations University Institute for Water, Environment, and Health. Bob is an accomplished writer and policy advisor and is committed to translating scientific research outcomes into language that decision makers can use to craft timely and meaningful public policy and to bringing international context to bear on local water issues. So Corinne and Bob, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. We'd like to share our thoughts on potential international opportunities and responsibilities that could fall under the umbrella of a Canada Water Agency. Even in a year dominated by COVID-19, floods, droughts, melting glaciers, and lack of access to drinking water have still made headline news in Canada. The evidence is clear. We're facing a water insecure future with our water resources under threat from contamination, from urbanization, and from land use and climate change. Further, COVID-19 has reminded us of the importance of water supplies for infection control, as well as of the gross inequities that exist within Canada and between countries. The public supports environmental and water leadership in Canada, but we're also a nation divided. We're divided on energy policy, on resource development, and on appropriate solutions that balance environmental, economic, and social needs. Despite, or perhaps because of this, Canada stands on the edge of opportunity. This opportunity for federal coordination and leadership and shared nations governance on water can move us towards managing Canada's water resources in a sustainable and equitable manner. It has the potential to benefit people living in Canada in ways beyond just living in a water secure country, as if that isn't enough. It also represents an opportunity for investment as part of a post-pandemic recovery plan. People around the world are calling on governments to build back greener. But in Canada, we have an opportunity to build back bluer with water central to sustainability plans. The bottom line is that these challenges, climate change, an increase in water-related climate disasters, biodiversity loss, fragmented water governance, and unresolved and uncharacterized Indigenous water rights represent an opportunity to drive innovation in research, technology, management, and regulation. Global Water Futures, as Stephanie introduced, is one of many Canadian examples that demonstrates the capacity, creativity, and potential that Canada has with respect to water leadership. A Canada First Research Excellence Fund program between the 4 core partner universities and the many user groups and communities. Global Water Futures bridges current and future water challenges. It bridges research policy and practice, and it bridges Canada international partnerships, whether between countries or with international organizations.
In getting our house in order, we can provide knowledge, expertise, and processes for other parts of the world. For a start, though, we can aim now for what constitutes effective 21st century national water policy. Through a Canada Water Agency, Canada can proactively address the kinds of new and intensifying water challenges we know will demand new approaches to freshwater management for the rest of this century. Good models also exist to help us, perhaps because of the relatively reduced influence of the fossil fuel sector in Europe as a whole. The European Union Water Framework Directive has possibly become the best example to which the world can turn in terms of the development of effective 21st century national and transnational water policy. A made in Canada approach will require what it required in Europe: active, not passive trust building established through the building of strong and durable interpersonal relations at all levels, the establishment and adoption of ambitious common goals and targets, clearly measurable results with meaningful consequences for non-compliance, and also ongoing help for those who have trouble keeping up. It also requires being innovative and courageous in our legislation. Wales took a bold step several years ago of legislating improvement in social, economic, environmental, and cultural well-being in their Well-Being of Future Generations Act. Just last week, the EU Trade Commission announced its intent to support transition to a climate-neutral economy and responsible and sustainable value chains. Enabling water solutions can save Canada billions of dollars by preventing damage to infrastructure and ecosystems and reducing disaster payments. The federal government can carefully target existing expenditures and realize new efficiencies between federal departments with water portfolios to financially support changes to a modernized Canada Water Act. Water solutions will make our industries, communities, and the places we live more resilient and less vulnerable to climate change, and will make Canada shine on the global stage by showing the world how to build lasting water security in an increasingly uncertain world.
Domestically and internationally, water is a powerful lever for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. It underpins environmental integrity, social development and resilience, and economic activity. On International Women's Day, it's also important to draw attention to the role of water in equity and gender equity specifically around the world. We need to commit to an intersectional approach that considers how power structures influence water management and resulting water-related inequities and vulnerabilities. People hold multiple intersecting identities such as age, race, socioeconomic status, gender identity, and ability. Inequities exist over space and time in terms of urban versus rural, water availability, water quality, access to drinking water, sanitation and hygiene facilities, and water fetching, ecosystem services access and use, and therefore their value, water-related disasters, water sector employment, and water management and governance. Back in 2015, before the Sustainable Development Goals were officially agreed upon, we surveyed 10 countries around the world to assess national capacities and needs to make sustainable advances in water and wastewater management, in ecosystem services, energy and agriculture, disaster risk reduction, water resources management and governance, but also in financing. Revisiting these over 5 years later, they're still relevant. We called for harmonized national water policies and enhanced knowledge, information, and data sharing, especially in transboundary contexts. We identified enabling factors to be able to collect, analyze, and share data and information in order to move towards evidence-informed decision-making, something that Canada has already committed to in its federal Sustainable Development Strategy. And we identified capacity needs, both within the water sector and within supporting sectors, governments, and the public, particularly with respect to literacy, water literacy, and the interpretation of prediction tools.
So what does this mean for a Canada Water Agency? Well, what it means is that Canada is home to water-related research capacity, expertise, technologies, and industries that are key to solving the water crisis and achieving sustainable water management in Canada, but which can also support other nations to sustainably manage their water resources for the economy, healthy populations, and the environment. Opportunities to export made in Canada solutions through trade and international development also exist widely. Even a cursory examination of perspectives on establishing better coordinated 21st century domestic water policy and the integration and extension of that policy into domains of diplomacy and international development reveals enormous, as yet unrealized opportunity. By linking the advancements in national cooperation on water with the goal of meeting new 21st century challenges to water management and linking these to foreign policy objectives, the Canada Water Agency can help Canada establish a new and very positive national image or brand abroad. Canada can reinvent itself on the world stage by using what we know about treating and managing water as a vehicle for expanding trade, while at the same time use our expanding expertise in water governance across multiple federal, provincial, and territorial ministries, and the example of successful nation-to-nation engagement as a means of fulfilling Canada's diplomatic and international development objectives. But to realize the enormous potential before us in the transformational moment that the pandemic has presented, we need as a nation to leave behind antiquated but deeply embedded habits of jurisdictional fragmentation and institutional territoriality that imprison us in water policy that may have served us adequately in the 20th century, but cannot possibly serve us now. There is work to be done, but the good news is that the the time is right to do that work. And we need to, in linking what we do domestically to who we are seen to be globally. We have all the pieces we need to redefine Canada as a water nation. All we have to do is assemble them differently. We also need to face the reality that COVID-19 has derailed progress toward the SDGs while offering an opportunity to pivot economic stimulus investments toward green and blue growth. In Canada, we have an opportunity to better link the water goal, 6, with the ocean goal, 14, climate action, 13, equality, 5, and as well as food and energy, SDGs 2 and 7. In 2018, UN member states committed to a decade of action on water for sustainable development to accelerate progress toward water-related SDG targets. The decade calls for sustainable development, integrated management of water resources for society, economy, environment, cooperation and partnership, and engagement of all stakeholders. We need to cultivate the huge strength and moral authority of the global UN system to achieve the goals of the decade and to help others do the same. To that end, we are pleased today to officially launch a Canada Water Decade portal to provide an opportunity for people in Canada to share resources, ideas, and solutions that they have enacted toward water sustainability, both in Canada and the rest of the world. There is huge opportunity here. All across this country, I've heard governments and private engineering firms proclaim respectively that they are world-class in terms of water governance and practice. We have groundbreaking initiatives such as the Collaborative Leadership Initiative that has brought together First Nations chiefs, mayors, and reeves for the first time in 150 years in Manitoba. We have a transboundary water management organization that is known all over the world and is 100 years old. So if we're world-class, why are we not world famous? Why are we not thought of as global leaders? Well, as it stands now, the institutional structures are not in place that will allow us to go that last half mile and achieve our goals. That said, the opportunity that is before us now is to get our water sector out of its silos and into the same running lane. What is needed is a carefully orchestrated flow of energies upward and outward from the water sector, focused on how much we know about and how much we respect water, and how valuable to others what we have to offer might be. Through water, Canada has an opportunity to create the same kind of virtuous circle domestically and internationally once established our reputation as global peacekeepers. The time, you may remember, when our reputation was such that young people put Canadian flags on their backpacks, even if they weren't Canadian. At present, we're not structured to close the virtuous circle linking domestic action and Canadian identity abroad on water, but we could be, and this is the moment to do it. Canadian participation in the current decade of action, Water for Sustainable Development, might at the right time be a perfect platform for announcing Canada's bold new intentions. So in conclusion, Corinne and I are of the view that the most immediate risk at the moment is that our society will lapse into some different but still functionally unaltered version of what we had before the pandemic, which would be a disaster leading only to other disasters. The world won't be and shouldn't be the same again. Our interest should reside not in recreating the world we had, but rather in creating the world we want and the world we need to have if we are to perpetuate tolerable living conditions for ourselves and for the rest of life on this planet in the future. So we see in this a transformational moment, not just for those who care about water and climate and social justice, but for all of us who care about the future. Let us seize that moment. Join us, learn, act, and share towards a sustainable water future for Canada. It is now my very great honor to introduce our next speaker. Shamila Nair Bedwell has a long and illustrious career with the United Nations, which has involved such extraordinary responsibilities as coordinating a network of 147 action offices around the world, working together to implement the Montreal Protocol to protect the Earth's ozone layer. In April 2019, she became the Assistant Secretary General for Natural Sciences with UNESCO in Paris, where she is a strong advocate for enhancing the role of women in science and engineering. And amazingly, she has a soft spot in her heart for Saskatchewan. Shamila, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Robert, and good afternoon, good evening to all the colleagues with us here today, and pleased to meet you, Ambassador Rob. Thank you very much for inviting UNESCO to this distinguished panel and a very important topic, I would say, which is really at the heart of humanity. So thank you to the University of Saskatchewan, Global Water Futures. Thank you to the Government of Canada for associating UNESCO with this extremely important event. I would like to start off by something which is very dear to my heart, and that is the International Day for Women, as we celebrate it today. I was one of those women in the mountains of South Africa during the apartheid years that had to push water in drums from one village to another so that my family could have access to water. So coming back to International Day for Women, this is a very auspicious occasion that Canada has chosen to discuss what could the Canada Water Agency do for the world and for women and girls. Girls spend over 200 million hours a day fetching water, while they should be in school studying, educating, to ensure that no one is left behind. And that is the appeal that UNESCO has today to the Canada Water Agency and to the Government of Canada to ensure that no one is left behind. We have prepared for you a couple of slides, and I'm going to ask my colleagues if they could please change the slides and put the first slide on the screen, please. My colleagues from UNESCO, could you please share the first slide? Thank you. Apologies for that. I guess there's been stuck in the system. Meryl, maybe you'll be able to share it. Thank you. Thank you very much. So let's start first with the progress on SDG 6. And I think it is alarmingly off track. We today have 2.2 billion people around the world who still lack safe water and sanitation, 785 million without basic drinking water. The population using safely managed sanitation services has increased from 28% in 2000 to 45% in 2017. But what does it actually mean? It means that still 4.2 billion people worldwide, across the world, lack safely managed sanitation, including, of course, safe drinking water. And this is really one of the biggest disasters we will face because we will not be able to achieve SDG 6. It's alarmingly off track. Now, we all say that water is essential to life. Well, every drop counts. And water is actually the connector, connecting every one of the SDGs. How can you educate a child who is thirsty? And this is where our journey begins with all of you. And this is the message UNESCO would like to pass to the Canada Water Agency. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as I have just said, water really connects all of us, and it is really at the center of the SDGs and other related agendas. UNESCO also produces the World Water Development Report. And in 2020, the report was that water is the climate connector, allowing for greater collaboration and coordination again across the majority of the targets for sustainable development. Climate change, the Paris Agreement, the Disaster Risk Reduction Framework, such as the Sendai Framework. So therefore, streamlining water, as you would see here in the circle, which depicts all of the SDGs, streamlining water into global climate sustainable development and disaster risk reduction processes is really a very important means of connecting the climate change issues, the impact of climate change on all the other SDGs. And this is extremely important to blend the insights, the perspectives, and the financial mechanisms through the water perspective. And this would be mutually beneficial, increase cost effectiveness, and help ensure that respective choices do not undermine or inadvertently heighten risk factors for other of the SDGs. So what can UNESCO offer in this partnership? And why is the partnership with Canada so important for UNESCO? Next slide, please, dear colleagues. Next slide, please. I would like to share with you a program which has been developed over more than 70 years since the birth of UNESCO. As you all know, UNESCO came to be after the ravages of the Second World War to promote peace in the minds of men and women through the education, culture, science, and communication. A very important program was set up already in 1946, and that is promoting water cooperation between nations to promote peace. An important program of UNESCO is the science and the natural sciences. To ensure that no one is left behind, we need to ensure that everyone has access to science, technology, and innovation. Well, the Intergovernmental Hydrological Program has at its heart promoting the science of water, innovation, modeling, and access to the latest science, technology, and innovation to enable water specialists and water professionals at different levels across the world to acquire the necessary competencies and skills to be able to advise their countries and governments on how to manage water effectively for a water secure world. And hence UNESCO is delighted to join in this initiative and really encourages and congratulates the government of Canada in promoting a Canada Water Agency. I would like to go to the next slide, please. So as an intergovernmental body, what does it comprise of? The UNESCO water family is enormous. It covers 193 member states. It aims to promote hydrological knowledge by supporting scientific research programs and building capacities through very specific communities and committees, which are actually the IHP committees, which are based in 169 governments and member states. Now, these IHP committees are specialized committees, hydrological committees. They advise countries and governments on quality, access, knowledge of water, but also in understanding projections of water so that countries themselves can become water secure for the entire water secure world. Now, as an intergovernmental program, we are built on 3 tracks. First of all, the hydrological science for policy relevant advice, education and capacity building, responding to the growing needs of sustainable development through safe access of water and water resources assessment and management to achieve environmental sustainability. Now, this water community and water family of UNESCO also comprises very specialized centers, which we will show you on the next slide. But these are 36 Category 2 centers. Can you go back to the previous slide, please, before I finish? This comprises the 36 Category 2 specialized centers, which I will come to just now. But we also have the 169 national committees across the world. And on the left-hand side, you see the committees and where they are based in all the countries across the world. But we also have the World Water Assessment Program, where we are mandated on behalf of the 32 members of the UN Water Family to produce annually the World Water Development Report. And this year's World Water Development Report will be a surprise launched on the 22nd of March, which is called Valuing Water. Dear colleagues, nobody will undermine and underestimate the value of water. COVID has brought to the forefront the value of one glass of water. Without water, you cannot even wash your hands. That is why UNESCO is delighted on behalf of the UN Water Family to produce this World Water Assessment Report and World Water Development Report annually, looking at the trends of water across the world. Now, on the next slide, we also have the 65 chairs, which are present across the world in universities. These are highly distinguished chairs recognized for their competencies and expertise in water. On the next slide, please, you will see the centers that UNESCO has across the world. And this is a wide range of centers, ranging from flow regimes to global networks on water in arid areas, but groundwater resources. And we have an important program which is called From Potential Conflict to Cooperation Potential. And I heard the previous speaker speaking about transboundary water cooperation. Well, that's exactly what it is about. This transboundary water cooperation is extremely essential to promote access to water and to promote peace among nations. We have a number of different initiatives, and this brings together the 36 distinguished specialized water centers across the world hosted by member states. On the next slide, please. Now, the Intergovernmental Hydrological Program, which has been serving member states for over 55 years, it used to be an international hydrological program, and the member states of UNESCO decided in 2019 that this should become an intergovernmental hydrological program. It has gone through different phases and stages, and the IHP, Intergovernmental Hydrological Program, Phase 8, ran from 2014 to 2021. And we are in the process now of developing what is called the IHP 9 strategy, which goes from 2022 to 2029. And the aim is to achieve sustainable water management and water security. There are a number of different areas in which we will be focusing, such as scientific research and innovation, bridging the data and the innovation gaps, water education in the fourth industrial revolution, inclusive water management, but also water governance based on the latest science and technology for mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. So this is ongoing discussion right now with the Governing Council of the IHP 9 to adopt a robust IHP 9 strategy to meet the needs of member states, the 193 member states, and also the partners across the UN water family. Next slide, please. So what are the opportunities and responsibilities that we could see? What is an opportunity for us as UNESCO to work with the Canada Water Agency in this international cooperation through UNESCO? On the next slide, please. Thank you. The next slide, please. We have heard earlier on, no, sorry, you've gone too fast. We have heard earlier on that the SDG6 is largely off track. Well, a new framework has been launched, and this is called the SDG6 Accelerator Framework, launched in New York. This framework brings together all of the UN family to be able to deliver as one and to ensure that every agency is able to use its expertise and to contribute to the SDG6 Global Accelerator Framework. UNESCO will contribute through the data and information. UNESCO Water Families, of course, is a key partner in this, contributing also to innovation, to good governance, but we will provide significant contribution to capacity development through all of the UNESCO Water Family. UNESCO's contribution is also through the Climate, Water and Climate Coalition, which is hosted by the World Meteorological Organization, who is a key partner working with us. Next slide, please. Thank you. Next slide. So while we are looking at the midterm review of the UN Water Action, we're also looking at a UN conference of the midterm comprehensive review of the implementation of the International Decade of Action for Water for Sustainable Development. And this meeting will take place in New York in March in 2023. And of course, Canada has a large contribution to make towards this. And here I would say that there are numerous opportunities for the global water futures, numerous opportunities for the Canada Water Agency. And we believe that through the next slide, we'll go into some details of how we could see this partnership in action. On the next slide, please. Thank you. So we believe that looking at the Planetary Water Prediction Initiative, for example, there's a possible collaboration between UNESCO and Canada. We could develop a memorandum of understanding between the Global Water Futures and UNESCO for setting the international agenda. Now, this is very important because water cycle in key high mountain areas and the downstream river basins are extremely important. And this will involve a strong collaboration and support to also the glacier and high mountain snow and hydrological monitoring and assessment programs of UNESCO, where we have already done some Atlas glacier monitoring in the Andes, and we are now working in Central Asia. We have a number of different demonstration projects. So we believe that within the framework of the Planetary Water Prediction Initiative, there are a number of different initiatives for us to develop collaboration and cooperation. And I would like to say that while we are highlighting ways in which Canada's water agency can collaborate, we have enormous potential across all of the water programs of UNESCO. May we move to the next slide, please? And we'll finish very soon. So within the water cooperation with the Planetary Water Prediction Initiative, we can look at water equity issues, the world water balance, the hazard mapping of the glaciers, as we've done previously with other agencies, the science policy discussion, and indigenous water issues. We also can revisit the studies on the water balance and the water resources of the earth. We do know that this is a very important item on the international agenda today. Now, I believe that the UNESCO Water Cooperation even can go beyond this, because UNESCO counts on the important collaboration with the government of Canada, because you have enormous wealth of information to share with the rest of the world to ensure that no one is left behind. Our role at UNESCO is to promote international scientific cooperation and solidarity in the sharing of science and technology. We are also in the midst of drafting what is called the recommendation on open science. And the aim of this is to ensure that there is no one left behind, that everybody can profit and take advantage of the access to the latest science and technology, data and information. And Canada is a large supporter of the Open Science Initiative of UNESCO, which we believe will become one of the biggest contributions to decreasing the knowledge gap between countries. It will be a game changer to enable everybody to benefit from science and technology. And that is why this partnership with Canada is so important. I'd like to go to the last two slides, please. So regional water management, we believe, is extremely important. And through the IHP, we can work together on the glaciers. We have already done quite a bit of collaboration with Canada in the past. There's a need to understand the cryosphere, the hydrology, the water resources, and who better to support us in this initiative than the government of Canada. And we look forward to working with you on this, to taking this to other parts of the world and supporting you in this initiative. The next slide, please. And I guess this is the last one. So how about UNESCO Canada Trust Fund for Water Secure World? We have a different trust funds with other countries and governments. For example, the Flanders Trust Fund for water activities in the field of science. We now have a trust fund on biodiversity and what we are calling the International Experts on Biodiversity with the government of Italy. We have different trust funds that we have set up where we bring together like-minded people to promote collaboration, cooperation, and sharing of information. We believe that this could also be a very important partnership. The Andean Glacier and Water Atlas, which was produced, is also an important example where we could collaborate for other parts of the world that count on Canada's technical support and expertise. And finally, and the last slide, I will end here. So the joint venture that we look forward to, we have had a number of different international water conferences at UNESCO with several hundreds of people participating and ministers from across the world, promoting science policy outreach event by UNESCO and Canada. Could also be an important event in early warning systems, the role of mountains, and the importance of sharing scientific information. So dear colleagues and Ambassador Ray, I do believe that there's important initiatives for us to build on. There are a number of different areas in which we could collaborate and we can work together to promote the water secure world. Given the expertise maintained by Canada, by its various institutions, we look forward to working with you to enabling that we can contribute to a water secure world for every child across the world. And that is my plea and my wish to you. Having lived in areas which were completely water insecure throughout my childhood, this is my appeal to all of you today on International Women's Day. Let's ensure that those women who spend 200 million hours a day fetching water now have access to science and education so that they can be part of the global world and a global change for water. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nair Bedwell, for your remarks. Hopefully I kept up with your presentation okay. Apologies for a couple of missteps there. Now, I have a fantastic addition to our agenda. I would like to introduce everybody to the Honorable Bob Ray, who is the Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Canada to the United Nations in New York. And he has joined us today, and I will pass it over to you for a few remarks, maybe a little bit of response to some of the great ideas that were just presented.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the chance, Stephanie, to join you and Professor Pomeroy and Madame Shamila. It's great to be with you from UNESCO, and I've really appreciated having an opportunity to listen. Just a couple of observations that I wanted to make about the opportunities that present themselves. The first is that we have I think an opportunity, as Bob Sanford pointed out, I think a unique opportunity now to bring together what is an extraordinarily rich set of skills and experience, but thus far relatively uncoordinated. And I think that the combination of the post-COVID world that we're entering into, not only in Canada, but globally, and in addition to that, the growing recognition of the importance of climate change and the impact that it's having on water and freshwater supplies around the world gives us an opportunity to do two things. One is to get our own act together more effectively than we've been able to do thus far. And I think we have to recognize that the richness of our skill set in our universities, in our cities, in Indigenous communities, within provincial jurisdiction, is not sufficiently coordinated to allow us to do the best job we could internally. And it's certainly true with respect to the challenge we face globally. And here I want to be so bold as to suggest that the federal government has to, in cooperation with the provinces, not sort of waiting for that to happen, but as we do that, I think we can much more effectively engage with the global community on what is going to be an ever-increasing crisis and challenge. I think we all recognize that COVID has accelerated, or if you like, decelerated the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. It's knocked us badly off course, not just with respect to one or two of the goals, but with respect to all of them. Mm-hmm. And this is going to be a challenge for the entire UN system and for all the countries that are part of it. So I don't really think we have much alternative when you consider the domestic challenges that we're facing, and when you put that together with the global challenges we're facing, to at one and the same time coordinate better what we're doing in Canada, and then to be able to engage much more effectively at the global level. Even in my brief time so far as ambassador to the UN, I've had several meetings with individual ambassadors and with UN agencies on the question of what more could Canada do on issues of water management as it relates to international development, and as it relates as well to the increase in conflict because of fights over water. I've ventured to say to some of my interlocutors to say, well, actually, we have experience on this. We've developed international regimes on managing international waterways, both in British Columbia, in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, as well as in Ontario and Quebec with the St. Lawrence agreements. And we've also launched in the last 5 years a broad national effort to ensure that we have safe water supplies for the Indigenous people who are living in Canada. And that remains a central challenge, which I think we've come to understand how these things are all connected to governance, connected to training, and connected to effective self-government. So we have a lot to learn, and we have a lot to teach and a lot to share. And I think the most effective way we can do that is by creating a water agency that can play an important coordinating role in our national life. So I really appreciate the opportunity to join with you today. Congratulate you for the organization. I very much appreciated the interventions from others. I think the idea of coordinating and working in cooperation with UNESCO is a very good one. And I look forward to hearing of the results of this great conference. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us and your remarks today. Very much appreciated by everybody attending. We are going to move on to the panel discussion portion of the agenda. We have 4 fantastic guests that will be chaired by Dr. Tom Axworthy. And we'll focus a little bit on digging a bit deeper on some of these opportunities that can be realized. So I'll just do a quick introduction to all of the panelists in the next section, a very quick introduction, and their more fulsome bios will be posted to the event page after the event, along with the recordings. So Dr. Axworthy has a distinguished career in government, academia, and philanthropy, and is currently the chair of public policy at Massey College. Water policy has been a consistent theme throughout his career in both the Prime Minister's office and as Secretary General of the Interaction Council and as president of the Gordon Foundation. Our panelists include Dr. John Pomeroy, who holds the Canada Research Chair in Water Resources and Climate Change and is a distinguished professor at the University of Saskatchewan, where he directs the Global Water Futures Program. Dr. Trish Stadnick is an associate professor at the University of Calgary and a Tier 2 Canada Research Chair in Hydraulic Modeling and a 2020 Killam Emerging Leader Laureate. Dr. Stephen Stanley is Senior Vice President of Commercial Services with Epcor Utilities, which builds, owns, and operates electrical, natural gas, and water and wastewater utility systems in Canada and the United States. And Dr. Dheeraj Pradhanaga is an assistant professor of hydrometeorology at the Tribhuvan University in Nepal and president of 2 nonprofit organizations, the Small Earth Nepal and the Center of Research for Environment, Energy, and Water. Thank you everybody for joining us, and I will ask you all to turn on your videos and unmute yourselves. And Tom, I'll pass it over to you to start the discussion.
You have to allow me to get back on the video. Sorry, Steph, it says that, okay.
There you go.
Is that on now? Good. All right, thank you.
There you are.
Well, oh, fine. We've had some very rich presentations already, and let's quickly just get into the questions that I want to pose to you, and then we'll see if we have time enough for those who've been watching the webinar. John, if we could start with you. Canada has been ranked being among the top 10 nations in terms of water expertise at universities, and certainly Global Water Futures would lead that pack. We're less well ranked in the development assistance we give on water. We're well below the top 10 in that area. So I want to ask you, how can the Canada Water Agency help in the very bold agendas that have just been outlaid from UNESCO and others? I know that you head up a prediction unit, have done extensive work with our Indigenous peoples. The International Joint Commission may have some lessons on process around conflict. Bob Ray talked about the expertise in Canada. How can we mobilize that to help in the decade of water?
Oh, thank you for the question, Tom. And it's certainly very much my thought as I heard the exit remarks from Ambassador Ray and Dr. Bedouil. Canada has an interesting position right now. We have the largest freshwater research program in the world, led from universities, with over 1,000 students, postdocs, and professors working on the freshwater problems in Canada, and now starting to look at the world through the Planetary Water Prediction Initiative. We've developed models of water quantity that are being coupled to climate and to water quality and water management and economics and policy outcomes for a region the size of the European Union that had not been modeled before in this way. So we have also, through Global Water Futures, found new ways to work with Indigenous communities through co-development of research programs and co-management of these research programs. I am very hopeful that the Canada Water Agency, as it develops, will be able to take on some of this capacity and some of these ways of doing business and implement them in Canada. But they also have great potential for outside of the country. We have learned, and we're getting better at managing a federal structure for water management in Canada. The provinces have the water resource rights under our constitution, but our river basins and the water itself flows where it needs to down the rivers, and those are not following along provincial boundaries. We also have important unextinguished Indigenous rights to water and treaty rights to water that need to be at the table. As we develop these solutions, these can also be solutions that Canada can export around the world. We also have our tremendous history of the bilateral relationship with the United States that has been largely successful through the International Joint Commission, and talk about an idea that could be exported successfully. My predecessor, Howard Wheater, was on the arbitration panel for the Indus River between India and Pakistan. And you could ever imagine a place where a joint commission on management of a river would be useful. If we can do it for the Great Lakes, if they can do it for the Indus, that's a tremendous advancement for that part of the world, as an example. The convening role of water allows Canada to come in. So we have vast amounts of water, and we export virtual water through our food exports around the world. And this is likely to increase with time. But if we can start then to export our expertise on modeling, our expertise in governance, our ability to address the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People in our water management as we move forward. If these are real accomplishments, and I'm hopeful that they will be under the Canada Water Agency, then this is something that the world needs. We are all facing the ravages of climate change in this century, and the impacts of climate change will be manifest through the water system. And this is something Canada, as custodian to a vast amount of the world's water, will be dealing with itself, and something that we can help other countries deal with as well. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Tricia, to you, we've just heard that the world is seriously off track in accomplishing goal 6 of the SDGs. And one of the, even pre-COVID, one of the reasons that I examined on this is that in terms of data indicators, modeling, less than a majority of the countries were able to fulfill the data for those indicators. So data is a pretty important part in getting us back on track on goal 6. So I wonder, with your expertise in cold region modeling and the potential role of the Canada Water Agency, can Canada help fill that data gap that we already know exists around goal 6?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Well, as we just saw, the UNESCO and United Nations both have a pretty strong focus on global water balance modeling and prediction. I think there's 2 ways of looking at data. There's observations, which obviously we need as many as we can get, but there is also a strategic focus that needs to be placed on modeling for 2 reasons. Number one, because there's many parts, such as in Canada, that are ungauged. A very large percentage of the Canadian landmass is either undergauged or not gauged at all. And Canada actually contributes 12% to the global water, global oceans in terms of freshwater discharge. And more than 60% of our waters drain north, and it's the north region that is critically undergauged in Canada. So modeling plays a key role there in understanding the change that's already happened. But also, observations aren't going to take us into the future. To look at what's happening in the future, we need to have modeling systems, and specifically advocating for, such as the Arctic Council, these integrated Earth system modeling platforms that reside at the intersections of many different kinds of science. We have to stop looking at it as disconnected, that there's a climate system and then a hydrologic system and then an ocean system, when in fact it's really just a global water balance. And we need models that are capable of going from top all the way full circle to bottom, if you will. This also affects our ability to look at sea ice and changes that will affect sovereignty and transportation across the north, which is critically important for our future in Canada, but also in the world. So does Canada have a role to play? Absolutely. It is actually our responsibility, in my opinion, with so much of our water contributing on a global stage. And I think we have an established history and track record of education and outreach. There's a lot of work that's going on already, interdisciplinary, between Canadian researchers and global water futures and other groups, and international organizations such as the Swedish Meteorologic and Hydrologic Institute, to establish pan-Arctic models that are capable of looking at this full water cycle. And we are specialists in Canada here in cold regions modeling, looking at glaciers and snow and ice and frozen soils. And so we can contribute those innovations to these modeling platforms. And then those modeling platforms can be used to look at transboundary water and also the disproportionate impact of climate change on the north. And that is critically needed because of the integration of science and policy. That's the piece that I think we really need to focus on in moving forward, is how do we then take this very complex science and translate it into something that is actionable, meaningful, and that can contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals across all of those sectors that were very nicely shown, where water is underpinning everything. But of course, we have to understand that water cycle in order to look at how to move that into policy. The role that the Canada Water Agency can play is in helping with the education, the outreach, and supporting this data collection and unification and the quality control that's required for that data to be meaningful across different jurisdictions and boundaries. Thank you.
Good, thank you, excellent. Stephen, if we can turn to you now. We've been talking about the capacity in Canadian universities and Canadian research. We have some very distinguished scientists with us today. but also in the private sector, both in the engineering services, in water technology. With those kinds of capacities in Canada, what is the role of the private sector in both working for a better water policy for Canada, but also making a contribution to the decade on water? Obviously, we go beyond universities and research, however important they are.
Well, thank you, Tom, and it's a pleasure to be here today. I think we've heard, already about some of the opportunities in terms of our expertise and modeling and policy and so forth. But I think one of the largest opportunities, at least economic opportunities for Canadian companies or private sector, is in the field of kind of water infrastructure. As we see out there, there's really hundreds of billions of dollars needed in terms of treatment plants, piping infrastructure, and a rapidly growing area in terms of kind of stormwater management to address some of the climate change issues that are out there. And Canada has had some big players or has some success stories in that. We've got companies like Stantec that are a large engineering company that, with 22,000 employees that are now, in that top 5 kind of ranking in terms of water consulting. Even ourselves, we've invested over $2 billion outside of Canada in terms of water infrastructure. And then many of the pension funds, actually, Canadian pension funds, have been very involved in infrastructure investments around the world. So it's a big opportunity out there for I think, our expertise and knowledge. But I think it's really important to realize that it's a very competitive market too, though. And so when we're out there competing, we're competing against even much larger international utility companies that are there. So, really for us to be successful, I think there's a number of things that are required. And I think the Canadian Water Agency can help with that. So, first of all, I think for other countries or municipalities to be interested in the work, Canada needs to be seen as having kind of a leading framework in water management. So that helps sell our capabilities internationally. I think it's also really important that the regulatory requirements are similar to other leading countries in the world. So, if we're not having the same requirements in terms of wastewater treatment or water treatment requirements, we're not going to have that knowledge and expertise to be able to compete on an international basis. I think a third area that's pretty key, and I think the Canadian Water Agency can help, is this culture of innovation. So, we've talked about research, and I think, we've got a lot of those capabilities. I think there's a need, to further coordinate that, as we kind of heard from Ambassador Ray. We've got a lot of expertise, and again, how do we coordinate that expertise and sell that internationally? But I think one area that there's additional need is help to support the commercialization of the technology. So we're pretty good at developing things, but really there's a kind of gap right now, I think, between developing that research and how does that really get to commercialization, and how is that support available for it. And then finally, I think it's neat in that innovation is a supportive regulatory framework for some of this innovation. Often in the field we're in utilities, it's a very conservative approach. But I think there are ways to kind of look at how we can, bring in new technologies and do that in a very safe manner. And then the final thing I'd like to highlight is really, and again, I think that was highlighted by Ambassador Ray, is the need to coordinate our approach to the international water sector. We've got a lot of expertise. There's companies like ourselves and other ones that are all going out there and looking for opportunities on an international basis. But mostly we're off doing it ourselves. And I think we've got a lot of expertise, and really I think a major role the Canadian Water Agency could do is help coordinate our approach to that international market. Now, I could talk about a number of other things, but I think that those are kind of the key things I wanted to touch upon. And so I'll turn it back to you, Tom.
Good. Well, thank you. And to complete our first round with the panel, Diraj everybody, I think, would be very interested to hear of the work that you're doing in Nepal. And I know you have some great relations with Canada, having studied here. What do you think that we've been talking with the Canada Water Agency and Canada in general? What does Canada have to offer countries like your own and NGOs like your own in trying to solve water problems? What is the basis for bilateral cooperation with Canada if we can persuade the Canada Water Agency to make it the international dimension a core capability?
Thank you, Tom, for the question. And I'm glad that I'm a part of this interesting webinar. So, well, when considering what Canada offers, I think that it's open laboratory for studying water, as mentioned by others as well. It has world's leading scientists and researchers, and definitely it has centers of excellence on fundamental and applied research in the area of water, publicly available hydrometeorological data. That is not the case in many parts of the world. And during my time there, as you mentioned, I had a very wonderful connection in Canada because I had experience on learning cold region hydrological modeling, which I hadn't done here in Nepal. And with those, the packages of programs, I could learn research tools, including programming languages and some open source data tools, networking in Canada and beyond as well. And definitely, I was engaged with several academic as well as research programs. And as you asked that how I could connect my learning in Canada over here and connecting to development in water sector in Nepal, but I see that there are a lot of opportunities of collaborations. Especially, we have already started memorandum of understanding in between the University of Saskatchewan and Tribhuvan University in Nepal, along with the Small Art Nepal, the NGO that I'm leading at present, and I'm also expanding that collaboration with CREW, that is mainly on research on water, energy, and environment. And we have Chris Devier, Praveen Rokaya, and myself, working on that, making it workable. And once this university to university collaboration is done, but I see that there is an opportunity for university to government collaboration as well. And we start with that. We have already several programs we have conducted recently. The first one was by John Pomeroy himself. He gave a talk to the Tribhuvan University, and it was very popular in the sense of, he was talking about very general topic on snow mountain hydrology, but it could attract many scientists and researchers, and especially graduate students as well. And we have put those, the webinars and the presentation slides online so that the attendees and other people could also access them. So what I see that, when Bob Shanford said about the adverse effect of COVID pandemic, I see an opportunity as well. How I see that we could explore some of the tools, online tools, for example, this webinar, and this has brought all of us into a very smaller place. We can collaborate very easily. Earlier, it would have been very difficult, traveling from one place to another. So this has been continued, and last month only, one of the postdoctoral of John Pomeroy, Chris Mercer, presented online about blowing snow concept in Canadian hydrological model, which is very new in this part of the world, and many people have shown the interest, how they could be applied here, and it is very interesting. It is like a very, I feel very proud to mention that today is International Women's Day, and we have just announced one course from the Small Art Nepal and Water Aid Nepal that we are going to organize Women in STEAM online course for recent graduates as well as young professionals working in water sector. And we have one of John's postdoctoral and PhD student, Dr. Kabir Rasoli, giving lecture, and I'm exploring more that how we could connect Center for Hydrology as well as Global Water Future with our organizations here in Nepal, Tribhuvan University, as well as other NGOs, so that these could be supporting for government's policy as well as the universities' training and capacity building programs.
Great. Well, I'm delighted that cooperation is so well advanced. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have several questions, and so I think Stephanie, rather than myself going through a second round, why don't we turn it to the questions from our audience, and let's try to distribute them to the different members of the panel.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom, and thank you to all the panelists. I'm going to include everybody in the question and answer, including Corinne and Bob. And I think I'll start with kind of a timely question around, what can our current situation within the COVID-19 pandemic, what can that kind of teach us? What are some lessons that we can learn from this situation to apply at a cooperative federalism level to address another highly complex pan-Canadian international issue such as water management under a changing climate? Maybe I'll ask Corinne if you'd like to weigh in on that, and maybe John as well if you'd like to add to her comments.
Yes, thank you, Stephanie. I agree there are lessons to be learned for health, but also for other cross-jurisdictional issues from the COVID-19. For me, part of the benefits of a Canada Water Agency is that it's proactive and preemptive coordination. And so it's building relationships and cooperation before a crisis hits. And I believe that one of the challenges has been that the issues have been reactive. And of course, we haven't dealt with a pandemic of this magnitude before in Canada or around the world. And so the lesson for me is to strengthen interjurisdictional mechanisms for these cross-sectoral, cross-jurisdictional issues before we're hit with a crisis or an immediate need to respond.
Yeah, thank you, Corinne. I would simply add to that, when that pandemic hit, I was very happy that there was a Public Health Agency of Canada. And similarly, when the next flood or massive drought hits, and they will, I would be much happier to have a Canada Water Agency, to have the predictions and forecasts from the best science in the country, speaking with an authoritative voice, with the capacity to work through cooperative federalism with all the provinces and territories and the Indigenous nations around this country, so that we have everyone at the water table making these decisions and making sure that we have the best information available to get through the increasing crises. Climate change isn't going away this century. I'm more optimistic now. We'll get carbon under control eventually, but we're still going to have decades of extreme events. And we have to be prepared for it. And the Canada Water Agency is the best way to do that nationally.
Great, thanks. I'm going to go to Trish now with a question around how can Canada better disseminate best practices in water resources development and management at the international level? I know some of your work in the EU has touched on translating modeling science into policy, and maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I think that's a great question. So, I mean, like everything that's being echoed right now, I think international cooperation is key. And superimposed on that is some thought, some more careful thought. Again, another lesson from the pandemic, understanding that there is an underlying mistrust in science sometimes, partly because of the way that we're selling it or marketing it. And I think if we did better job as scientists in thinking about how to get it out there into policy. And so one example that you're referring to is the European Union Copernicus Climate Change Service project that I had the pleasure of representing Global Water Futures in. And we designed with some web developers a interactive website or interface to take some of my model simulations, such as the comparison between different climate change scenarios, as well as hydrographs under, so streamflow under regulation, current conditions in the Nelson River system, but also what those same streamflows would have looked like had that regulation never been built. And they helped me to visualize that data and make an interface that the general public could interact with. A similar project, I was involved with an ebook that was generated as a cooperation between the University of Manitoba and Manitoba Tourism and Via Rail that exists on the train ride north to Churchill. It's not too popular right now because the pandemic hit and a lot of people aren't traveling. But the idea is to put the science of climate change in the Arctic in the hands of the people so that they can actually touch plants and animal specimens and see what we're losing in this whole process. And I helped to write some of that ebook and do some of the graphics for it. And I think it's just a wonderful way of communicating the importance of the changes that we're seeing in science.
Great, thank you. Maybe I'll ask Steve if he would like to comment a little bit more on how a Canada Water Agency might help to facilitate the modernization of water treatment and other infrastructure here in Canada, but also globally, given how much private sector experience Canada has.
Well, I think there's a couple things that they can help on that's there. I think number one is even nationally coordination. So we talked a little bit about international coordination, but if you look at really the regulatory structure in Canada right now, it's provincially based. And if you start looking at companies trying to develop new technologies, really it's a province by province basis of dealing with regulators to really get that developed. And if you look on an international basis, the market in any one province is pretty small, and so it's expensive to kind of go in and take that approach on dealing with all these different regulators. And so if they can help coordinate, especially on the technology side, of getting those technologies approved and making sure that they're available, I think that's one area. And then I think the other thing that we discussed about, not only promoting, our knowledge in terms of our expertise in modeling and all these other things on an international basis, again, helping to market that expertise that we have in terms of treatment and other approaches to water infrastructure on that international basis. Because we do see that, many other countries are out there doing that quite effectively, and we're competing against those countries and the companies that are in there. So I think those are the two, it's that coordination aspect that I think could be really key for the Canadian Water Agency.
Thanks. I'm gonna go back to Corinne again. Hopefully that's okay with everybody. But this, I think, is an important question. It was noted that perhaps how we want to be seen globally doesn't really align with kind of our level of investments globally, or even our ability to kind of leave no one behind in Canada. Do you have some comments on how we might realign those objectives and kind of come up with a better approach for human rights for water and sanitation?
Absolutely. And it really comes back to what Bob and I termed getting our own house in order. And the 1%, I agree, it's probably more than that. It mainly is our Indigenous peoples, First Nation communities. We've heard others talking about it. We have homeless, we have inner city poverty. We don't have the data in the same way that the US does on what they term plumbing poverty, but we know that it exists, and we've seen it exacerbated through COVID-19. And 1% of our population is 360,000 people or more. So again, we have to be able to not leave people behind in Canada in order to then be able to be recognized for not leaving anyone behind on the global stage. And you've heard from others in the chat and the panelists about the technologies we have. We have small and remote communities that we need to be able to serve 24/7 with water that's of potable quality. And we need to do it within the context of nation to nation and self-governance. And so we have the opportunity to engage in processes, to engage in governance structures, to engage in technologies that work in cold regions, that work for small and remote communities that have trouble linking up and gaining the sort of the external expertise, if you will. We have circuit riders within many of our provinces and territories, particularly for First Nation water treatment. So again, that coordination role that everybody's been talking about, making sure that we don't leave anyone behind in Canada, and then using the knowledge, the expertise, the technology, the governance systems and the processes to then be able to help people in other countries that have similar issues or similar challenges that we can support and address.
Thank you. I'm not sure who this should go to. Maybe John or even Tom or anybody who wants to jump in. But I wonder if there's a role for Canada to play in terms of kind of transboundary disputes. So we have a lot of experience through the International Joint Commission and other regional Canadian negotiations like the Mackenzie and the Columbia. Are there ways that Canada can play a role in helping the negotiations in other parts of the world where there are some pretty serious water conflicts?
Well, I don't know, Steph, if I have an answer to it, but I can certainly say that in the Interaction Council of former world leaders, we've addressed global water issues about 2 to 3 times. And always the number one question, there are 2 actually, questions that are addressed to the Canadian delegates are, how does the International Joint Commission work? How do you peacefully analyze and settle disputes around water, since there are such tremendous worries about water conflict? And so we have a century of being able to work things out with the superpower, and just also people consistently ask about Indigenous expertise in Canada, whether that will be part of the Canada Water Agency, and how that may work out in Canada, because of course Indigenous peoples across the globe are trying to fight for their rights. So I don't have any doubt that just as the Charter of Rights and Freedoms has become a document that Supreme Courts and others around the world have asked Canadian expertise on, the International Joint Commission and the peaceful resolution of boundary disputes is also something around the world there's tremendous interest in.
Yes, Stephanie, I would just add to that is again, we think of ourselves as a water-rich country in Canada, but not only are we not quite so water-rich, but the waters where most Canadians live in southern Canada are shared waters. Every large Canadian city is sharing its water to some degree with the United States, except for Vancouver, which receives the Fraser River completely from within the boundaries there. But in some cases, we are the primary source of the water to the United States, as in the Columbia. In some cases, we are very much downstream of the United States, as in the Red River in Manitoba. And then, of course, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence, which supports the economic powerhouse of Canada, and a vast part of its population is very much a shared resource. So that's a tremendous example to take internationally. And I would be delighted if we could add to that successful incorporation of Indigenous water management along with this national and transboundary water management to bring our First Nations to the table there, along with our provinces and territories, and show how we can do this right. That's a tremendous example to take forward.
Stephanie, could I make one observation on that? The new administration in the United States is about to revive a 2017 national security strategy in order to restore their own flagging reputation abroad. And the first step in the revival of that water strategy is for the US to create a national water commission. And building on the century-long relationship we have by way of the International Joint Commission, with respect to anticipating and then acting on potential disputes between our two countries, we need to keep up with this because they're neighbors on the same continent. We need to be in lockstep with their efforts to create at last 21st century water policy. So this is a great opportunity for us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bob, for jumping in there. There's more great questions that I'd love to get to, but we have to wrap up. And I want to thank all of our guests for adjusting to the agenda changes today. I'm really happy that we got to be able to do some question and answers from the audience. So thank you. I will pass it over to Corin and John from Global Water Futures to make some closing remarks and some next steps. And I'll ask Haley to do a quick screen share to support the remarks.
Okay, Corinne, why don't you start and I'll wrap up.
I would just like to thank everybody for engaging in this conversation. It's clearly there's a lot more that we can talk about, but I would like to emphasize that the equity and the leave no one behind, no matter whether they're within Canada or internationally, is one of the critical elements. And as was pointed out, water underpins so much social and economic development, and we also need it for the environment. So it's a really good starting point for making sure that we proceed not just sustainably, but equitably in what we do. And see that as a really good opportunity, building on the international gender agenda and also the GBA plus initiatives that the federal government has already implemented to be able to continue this through the water sector.
Yes, thank you, Corinne. And I want to thank all of our panelists and speakers for a absolutely delightful discussion. I think it advances Canada's thoughts on international dimension to the Canada Water Agency quite a bit. And we're not starting from scratch. We have a tremendous history of this with the Prairie Farm Rehabilitation Administration, with the international water aspects of the Canadian, of CEDA, the International Development Agency, and through the International Joint Commission. We're not starting from scratch, but we have a lot to rebuild and a lot to coordinate, and a tremendous national capacity that could be put to work on this and could brand Canada, not just the country with the greatest amount of water per person, but the country that provides the greatest water solutions to the rest of the world. And that would be a wonderful legacy for us. Thank you.
And John, we have a few events coming up over the next few weeks. Do you want to touch on those and invite folks to participate?
Yes, thank you. Lots going on here. We have a Women in Water lecture for March 18th, and that is on valuing water in line with the UN World Water Day. We also, and that is in fact part of the Global Water Futures World Water Day celebrations. We also have World Water Day from Canmore, Alberta on valuing mountain water with Parliamentary Secretary for the Canadian Water Agency, Terry Duguid, Neil Mishra, Chief of Hydrological Systems and Water Scarcity at UNESCO, Berit Arhammer, who is professor with the Swedish Meteorological and Hydrological Institute and president of the International Association for Hydrological Sciences, myself and a few other people from Canmore. The mayor of Canmore, John Borman, will be there as well. So we look forward to that very much. And I want to remind everyone, Global Water Futures will be having its annual science meeting. This is an open science meeting, May 15th to 17th. It will be virtual this year, online. So we don't get to go to Waterloo, Ontario, which is a great shame, but we do get to see each other, at least on the screen, at least for one more year like this. And so May 15th to 17th, save the dates, and we will be developing that program and announcing it very soon. Thank you all so much for this fascinating and I hope useful discussion as Canada designs its water agency. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'll be circulating the recording, so watch your email for that, and an invitation to these upcoming events as well. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.